Welcome back to The Deep Dive, the show built entirely around your sources, your reports, your complex articles, and your research distilled into the focused knowledge you need.
Today, we are opening up a file on a nation that is really defined by paradox.
A place where immense global power rests on, well, a foundation of absolute rule.
Yeah.
We're talking about the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, or KSA.
It is, and I don't think this is an exaggeration, arguably one of the most compelling political and social laboratories in the world right now. I mean, our
Yeah.
sources make it really clear that this isn't just another oil-rich state. This is an absolute monarchy that is currently attempting one of the world's most rapid, profound, and, often deeply contradictory transformations.
It's like a clash of centuries.
Exactly. You're looking at where a vast 21st century oil wealth crashes directly into an 18th century ideological pact. It's forcing modernization into a head-on conflict with ultra-conservative tradition.
Okay, let's unpack this right from the foundational facts. We have to start with the sheer scale of the place.
Oh, it's massive.
I mean, the KSA is the largest country in the Middle East, covering about 2.15 million square kilometers. That puts it, 12th in size globally?
Yeah, and for context, that's about 80% of the entire Arabian Peninsula. It's also geographically unique.
In what way?
It's the only country to have coastlines along both the Red Sea and the Persian Gulf.
Which is a huge strategic advantage.
A huge one. And that size, that geography, it really underpins its political structure. Officially, the KSA is a unitary Islamic absolute monarchy.
Okay, so when we say absolute monarchy, what does that actually mean in practice?
Well, it means you have to understand that the country doesn't operate under a secular constitution or common law like you'd see elsewhere. Instead, the ultimate law of the land is defined by the Quran and the Sunnah.
The traditions and practices of the Prophet Muhammad.
Exactly. That religious authority is, well, it's absolute.
And the state's very identity seems to reinforce that theological and monarchical control. Their official motto is the Shahada.
There is no God but God. Muhammad is the messenger of God.
But there's a fascinating detail about the country's name itself that really, highlights this political structure.
It's a really powerful linguistic marker of ownership, actually.
How so?
The official Arabic name, Al-Mamlaka al-Arabiya as-Saudiya, translates literally as the Saudi Arab Kingdom.
The Saudi Arab Kingdom?
Right. And that inclusion of Saudi, derived directly from the dynastic name Al-Saud, is unique in global politics. It expresses the view that the country is not merely governed by the royal family, but is, in essence, the personal possession of the House of Saud.
That is an incredibly potent statement of absolute power. It's woven directly into the nation's identity, into every passport stamp.
And it's an identity that rests on incredible financial muscle.
Precisely. That absolute power sits on top of an economy categorized by the World Bank as high income. It's the 19th largest economy by nominal GDP globally, and critically, the largest in the entire Middle East.
And that wealth, of course, is rooted in its status as an energy superpower. It controls the world's second largest proven oil reserves, which gives it this completely disproportionate global leverage.
So our mission today is to go deep into those dualities. We need to understand how that 18th century alliance between, the sword and the scripture, how that functions alongside 21st century ambition, oil wealth, and the massive geopolitical influence that comes with it.
We'll be looking at the history, the politics, and the massive, often tense societal shifts that are happening right now as we speak. To truly contextualize the modern state, we really have to start by grounding ourselves in the geography and the deep past of the Arabian Peninsula.
Yeah, because the landscape itself has profoundly dictated the history and the challenges of just survival there.
Absolutely.
I found the geographical details genuinely staggering. As we noted, the KSA occupies about 80% of the entire Arabian Peninsula, which is the world's largest. But here's something you might not know. The exact size of the country is technically undefined.
Right, because its land borders with the UAE and Oman are still not precisely marked.
It's a remnant of historical tribal boundaries, not modern national ones.
And that ambiguity speaks to the vastness of the empty spaces there. The terrain is just dominated by arid desert, lowland, steppe, and mountains.
And the most famous feature is the Rub al Khali.
The empty quarter. And it's not just a desert, it's the world's largest contiguous sand desert. It covers an immense 647,500 square kilometers.
That's just a number. It's hard to even picture that.
It is. The sheer size of this uninhabitable landmass means the kingdom has always been highly concentrated along its coasts and, of course, in its oases.
And that concentration is dictated by one thing: water.
Yes.
Our sources highlight this critical defining factor. Saudi Arabia is the largest country in the world by area that has, and this is key, no permanent rivers.
Think about that for a second. That constraint on development, on life itself, it's a constant struggle for existence.
So where does the water come from?
The supply depends on sparse rainfall that feeds what they call wadis, non-permanent riverbeds, as well as basins and oases. But survival for the modern large population is dependent on industrial solutions.
You mean desalination?
Exactly. Currently, desalination provides roughly 50% of the country's drinking water, a massive technological undertaking that requires staggering amounts of energy.
So while we think of Saudi Arabia as uniformly hot and sandy, our sources revealed some surprising geological features that defy that image. One fascinating detail is that the kingdom is home to over 2,000 dormant volcanoes.
Yeah, that's something that catches most people off guard. These are ancient volcanic fields. Large lava fields, known locally as Herat, cover a vast area 180,000 square kilometers in the Hejaz region.
And it's not always hot either.
No, not at all. To challenge that image of perpetual heat even further, annual snowfall is not uncommon in the northern mountainous regions, particularly in Tabuk province. It just demonstrates the extreme temperature fluctuations the peninsula experiences.
So, if scarcity and extremes define the physical landscape, let's look at how deep human history shaped the societal landscape, long before the unification or the rise of Islam.
The human history here is globally significant. The prehistory of Saudi Arabia shows some of the earliest traces of human activity outside of Africa.
How far back are we talking?
We're talking about tools and remains dating back an incredible 125,000 years. Archaeologists see the region as pivotal in understanding humanity's dispersal across the world.
And it wasn't just a migratory path, right? There were genuine innovations in early civilization.
Oh, absolutely. In the Neolithic period, around the 4th millennium BC, a prominent civilization known as the Almagar culture flourished in what is now southwestern Najd.
And they're known for something specific.
Yes, this culture is recognized as one of the world's first to involve the widespread domestication of animals, specifically the horse. Rock engravings discovered there suggest horse domestication dates back more than 8,000 years.
So they were pushing back the timeline for this crucial advancement in human history.
A huge advancement, and that level of settlement and advanced organization links directly to the ancient trading empires that followed.
Right.
We see settlement phases linked to the Dilmun civilization, which began in the early 3rd millennium BC. And moving forward, large portions of North Arabia were ruled by the Nabateans.
The civilization famous for Petra.
The very same. Their monumental rock-cut tombs at Hegra, also called Al-Hijr, are preserved today as a UNESCO World Heritage Site. It demonstrates a sophisticated, multicultural, and importantly, a pagan past.
And this millennia-long history of trading routes and unique civilizations was completely reshaped in the 7th century.
With the emergence of Islam in Mecca, led by the Prophet Muhammad, this event effectively united the entire Arabian Peninsula under a single theological mandate.
And the immediate political consequence was the creation of some of the most influential empires in history.
That's right. Arab dynasties that originated from KSA territory founded the 4 great early caliphates, the Rashidun, Umayyad, Abbasid, and Fatimid,
which expanded Muslim rule into massive areas of North Africa, Asia, and Europe in a really short period of time.
a remarkably short time. And although the political capital shifted away to Baghdad, Damascus, later Cairo or Istanbul, the religious heart remained in the peninsula.
So Mecca and Medina were still central.
Always. From the 10th to the 20th century, the holy cities were governed by the Sharif of Mecca, who acknowledged the sovereignty of whichever great Islamic empire dominated at the time.
This sustained link to the wider Muslim world, combined with local governance, really sets the stage for the dramatic and much more localized story of the House of Saud's rise. Now we arrive at the political crucible. This is the unique ideological pact that led directly to the creation of the modern Saudi state. This is where the religious impulse and the dynastic ambition really become one.
The current state is essentially the 3rd attempt by the Al Saud dynasty to consolidate power. It began in 1727 in Diriyah. But the critical moment, the real turning point, came in 1744.
That's when Mohammed bin Saud, the local ruler, formed an alliance.
He joined forces with Muhammad ibn Abd al-Wahhab, the founder of the fiercely ultra-conservative Wahhabi movement within Sunni Islam.
So why was this particular alliance so pivotal? What made it stick?
It was a symbiotic deal, a perfect partnership, in a way. Bin Saud provided the military and political protection, the sword.
And Ibn Abd al-Wahhab provided the ideology.
Exactly. The theological justification for conquest and the ideological glue necessary to unify these disparate, often warring tribes. This 1744 pact provided the essential, radical ideological impetus for expansion, and it remains the constitutional and religious basis of dynastic rule to this day.
The actual unification process was long and it was bloody. The sources trace the final push to Abdulaziz, known as Ibn Saud.
He recaptured Riyadh in 1902, establishing the final Saudi state, and he relied heavily on a powerful, religiously motivated fighting force to do it.
The Ikhwan.
The Ikhwan, which means the Brotherhood. They were a tribal army, but they were more than just mercenaries. They were fanatical Wahhabi adherents. Ibn Saud utilized them brilliantly to seize territory.
He captured the fertile Al-Asa region in 1913.
And it culminated in the conquest of the rival kingdom of Hejaz in 1924-25, which gave him control of Mecca and Medina. For the Ikhwan, their mission was to purify the peninsula of what they saw as religious deviations.
So the Ikhwan were this indispensable tool of unification, but they ultimately proved to be too radical, even for Ibn Saud's political goals.
Exactly. This is a perfect example of the tension between ideology and realpolitik. The Ikhwan viewed any compromise as a betrayal of their pure vision.
And they rebelled.
They did. They rebelled against Ibn Saud's tentative steps toward modernization and, more critically, his decision to stop raiding British protectorates in Kuwait and Iraq. They saw his pragmatism as insufficient Islam.
So this fundamental ideological conflict just erupted into a localized civil war.
It did. The ultimate showdown came in 1929 at the Battle of Sibilla. Ibn Saud, using modern weaponry supplied by the British, crushed the Ikhwan.
So he defeated the very radical religious element that had helped to build his state.
Yes, asserting that state power, the dynastic rule, was ultimately above the dictates of the most hardline clerics. This was a necessary step for the formation of a sovereign state that could be recognized by international powers.
And then 3 years later, in September 1932, the kingdoms of Hejaz and Najd were formally unified,
Proclaiming the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia.
This foundational history sets the political stage, but the economic transformation that truly globalized the KSA that was still pending.
Right. Before 1938, the kingdom was poor. Its economy was incredibly modest, relying mostly on limited agriculture and the relatively small revenue stream from the annual Hajj pilgrimage.
And then everything changed.
Everything changed with the 1938 discovery of vast oil reserves in the Al-Asa region. It was a turning point that shifted global tectonic plates.
The full-scale development that followed, starting around 1941, under the American-controlled Aramco, the Arabian-American Oil Company, it just catapulted Saudi Arabia into a position of geopolitical power almost overnight.
The oil boom gave the KSA substantial international political leverage, which they learned to wield very, very quickly. The most famous early example was the 1973 OPEC oil boycott,
where Saudi Arabia led this action against Western nations supporting Israel in the Yom Kippur War.
and the result was dramatic. Global oil prices quadrupled almost instantly. That demonstrated the KSA's ability to destabilize the global economy as a political tool.
And they eventually asserted full ownership over that wealth.
Yes. They gained 20% control of Aramco in 1972, and then completed the process by buying out American interests entirely by 1980, creating the Saudi Arabian Oil Company, now one of the most powerful corporations on earth.
But that period, the late 70s, proved to be a pivotal point that really shook the stability the oil money had promised.
It was a year, 1979 specifically, that acted as a major turning point. It led to a profound, decades-long shift towards stricter religious adherence by the state.
Why did 1979 matter so much?
It was a dual threat that struck at the core legitimacy of the House of Saud. First, you had the Iranian Islamic Revolution, led by Ayatollah Khomeini. This was a massive blow to regional Sunni authority.
Because it was led by Shia clerics.
Right, and this caused deep concern in Riyadh over the possibility of a Shiite minority rebellion within Saudi Arabia, particularly in the eastern province where the majority of the oil fields are located. They feared ideological contamination.
And the second threat was internal and arguably more immediate.
That was the Grand Mosque seizure in Mecca. A large group of Sunni Islamist extremists, led by Juhayman al-Taibi, captured the holiest site in Islam.
And what was their charge against the ruling family?
Their central charge against the Al Saud was that the monarchy was corrupt and un-Islamic, citing modernization and lavish spending. This was essentially the Ikhwan rebellion all over again, but right in the holy city.
So what was the monarchy's calculated political response to being squeezed between these radical Shia and radical Sunni elements?
The government's response was definitive and lasting. After they regained control of the mosque, with French and Pakistani assistance, and executed the militants, the royal family made a strategic political calculation.
Which was?
They decided to neutralize the Sunni fundamentalist threat by, in effect, adopting some of its clothes. They deliberately strengthened the power of the ulema, the religious scholars, giving them greater authority to enforce stricter observance of religious and social norms across the entire kingdom.
So the state doubled down on that 1744 pact to shore up its legitimacy.
Exactly. This is when the cultural crackdown began. Our sources note this included closing all public cinemas, enforcing much stricter dress codes and separation of sexes, and ramping up support for religious education both domestically and internationally.
So this shift essentially inoculated the Al Saud against charges of being un-Islamic from domestic fundamentalists.
But at the cost of decades of social and cultural stagnation. To understand the KSA today, we have to look at this unique, highly centralized nexus of power, where the absolute monarchy and the religious establishment are completely interwoven. It's a system unique in the G20.
And it is absolute rule in the truest sense. The king currently, Salman bin Abdulaziz Al Saud, he combines the legislative, executive, and judicial functions of the state. Royal decrees are the basis of all legislation.
And as our sources clearly state, there is no pretense of democracy.
Yeah.
No political parties are permitted, and there are no national elections for leadership.
They do have a body called the Consultative Assembly, the Shura Council.
Right, comprised of 150 appointed members. But its role is purely advisory. It has no real legislative power. The key to understanding political stability is recognizing that the real political mechanism is the vast Al Saud family itself.
Which is estimated to include at least 7,000 princes.
7,000.
How does that vast family network actually translate into governance? It sounds unwieldy.
Well, the functional power is concentrated among the roughly 200 male descendants of Ibn Saud. These senior princes dominate the political landscape. They control all the key ministries: defense, interior, foreign affairs, and the governorships of the 13 regions.
So this massive network serves as a form of royal consensus.
It does. While the king is absolute, policy is often achieved through internal family discussion and agreement among these senior members, which makes the rule absolute, but not entirely unilateral.
This concentration of wealth and power inevitably leads to the issue of corruption, where the lines between state revenue and personal family wealth become totally blurred.
It's a systemic issue, and it's sometimes even acknowledged by senior royals. They defend the use of state assets for family patronage as necessary to maintain the internal coherence of the ruling elite.
This inherent tension was dramatically addressed, or maybe redefined, during the 2017 anti-corruption purge.
That purge, staged largely at the Ritz-Carlton in Riyadh, was unprecedented. It was a shocking show of force.
As many as 500 prominent individuals, including powerful princes, ministers, and influential business magnates, were detained.
And it was less about eliminating corruption across the board and more about consolidating power under the crown prince. It signaled a clear willingness to challenge the traditional structures of royal privilege and patronage that had defined the kingdom for decades.
So that's the political pillar. The second crucial pillar, of course, is the religious establishment, the ulema.
The KSA really stands apart among Muslim states for giving the ulema, the body of Islamic jurists, a direct official role in government. They are the proponents of the Salafi movement, which is commonly known as Wahhabism.
And they are historically led by the Al-Sheikh family,
the descendants of Muhammad ibn Abd al-Wahhab, reinforcing that 18th century ideological pact.
So the pact isn't just history, it's a functioning power-sharing arrangement today.
Exactly. It's a mutual support mechanism. The Al Saud protect and propagate the Al-Sheikh's religious authority, allowing them to control the judiciary, influence the vast state educational system, and promote Wahhabi doctrine.
And in exchange,
the Al-Sheikh legitimized the Al Saud's political rule and mandate obedience from the populace. While King Abdullah took some steps post-2005 to chip away at their institutional power, their influence was solidified dramatically after the 1979 events, and they still wield tremendous influence over social life and the courts.
This religious foundation dictates the character of the entire legal system.
It does. The legal system relies on Islamic Sharia as its primary source, and critically, it is largely uncodified.
What does that mean in practice, uncodified?
It means there isn't a system of judicial precedent where past rulings strictly bind current judges. Instead, judges are allowed wide use of independent legal reasoning. They tend to follow the Hanbali school of jurisprudence.
Why is the adherence to the Hanbali school so significant here?
Well, the Hanbali school is known for its particularly strict and literalist interpretation of the Quran and Hadith. When you combine that literalism with a lack of codification and precedent, it leads directly to legal unpredictability.
You can have divergent judgments for similar crimes.
Exactly. It depends heavily on the judge's individual interpretation. This inconsistency is a major hurdle for any modernizing economy or for individuals seeking justice.
But there appears to be state recognition of this problem and an attempt to modernize the legal mechanism itself.
A huge, potentially revolutionary shift was announced in 2021. The kingdom announced plans for comprehensive judicial reform aimed at entirely codifying its laws, covering everything from personal status to commercial law.
And the goal is to eliminate those discrepancies.
Right. To introduce consistency and make the legal system more predictable for international businesses and for citizens alike.
Despite these reform attempts, the punishments mandated by the system are often what draw the most global attention and condemnation.
They're stark. Retaliatory punishments, known as qisas, are practiced. This is a system of eye for an eye justice. The sources detail instances where, for example, a victim who has lost an eye can insist that the court order the surgical removal of the perpetrator's eye.
That is legally brutal. How does the state reconcile this highly individualized, victim-driven, justice-like qisas, or the payment of daya, blood money, with the concept of a modern, predictable legal system they are attempting to codify?
And that is the central paradox. Sharia-based justice often emphasizes the victim, or the victim's family, as having sovereign power over the sentence, such as the ability to choose between the death penalty or payment of diya for unlawful killing. This contrasts sharply with Western state-driven criminal justice.
And capital punishment is applied very broadly.
That's correct. The death penalty can be imposed for a wide range of offenses: murder, rape, armed robbery, drug trafficking, apostasy, adultery, even witchcraft and sorcery. Methods include beheading with a sword, stoning, or firing squad.
But there are signs of easing.
Slow signs, yes.
Yeah.
The Crown Prince pledged in 2022 to eliminate all capital punishments except for one category mentioned in the Quran, which is essentially homicide under certain conditions. And separately, flogging was eliminated from the court system entirely in 2020.
Despite these internal tweaks, the human rights record remains a massive international challenge for the kingdom.
Oh, absolutely. Saudi Arabia is consistently denounced globally for its human rights violations and ranks not free by Freedom House. Historically, this tension is baked right in. Saudi Arabia famously abstained from the UN vote adopting the Universal Declaration of Human Rights.
And their reasoning.
They stated explicitly that the declaration contradicted Sharia law, that historical rejection defines its judicial philosophy to this day.
Shifting our focus now, let's look outward. Saudi Arabia's oil wealth doesn't just fund the state apparatus, it projects influence across the globe. But the kingdom is desperately trying to lessen its crippling dependency on that single commodity through what they call Vision 2030.
The challenge of diversification is monumental because the reliance is just so deep. Oil still accounts for about 45% of nominal GDP.
And structurally, the economy is reliant on foreign labor.
Hugely. Roughly 80% of private sector employees are non-Saudi. This creates significant internal pressures and vulnerabilities, especially with a rapidly expanding native population needing jobs.
Vision 2030, championed by Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, is the comprehensive plan designed to address this. What does it entail beyond just the big, shiny mega projects we see in the news?
It's an entire restructuring plan. It aims to stimulate the private sector, increase non-oil revenue, and provide jobs for that rapidly growing young Saudi population. Key elements include massive privatization efforts, selling off state assets in telecommunications, water, and even parts of education.
And how's that going?
Well, our sources indicate consumers have already raised serious concerns about the performance and cost of these newly privatized services. But the push is still on.
And part of that redesign is repositioning themselves geographically for global trade, beyond just moving oil tankers.
Exactly. Since joining the WTO in 2005, they are rapidly expanding massive maritime hubs, such as the Jeddah Islamic Port and the enormous King Abdullah Economic City.
The goal is to move the KSA from being just an energy source to becoming a logistical powerhouse.
Right, linking trade between Europe and China and connecting directly to the maritime Silk Road. They want to be a critical, indispensable nexus for global logistics.
But the paradox of their resource management is highlighted perfectly by what happened to their domestic agriculture. This is a critical case study in resource mismanagement funded by oil wealth.
This is a devastating example of short-term political vanity overriding environmental science.
Hmm.
For decades, the KSA pursued ambitious self-sufficiency in agriculture, particularly wheat, through heavy subsidies.
And the problem?
The problem was they were using ancient, non-renewable groundwater supplies water that took millennia to accumulate.
Hmm.
Our sources state that this overcultivation resulted in the catastrophic loss of an estimated 4/5 of total groundwater reserves by 2012.
4/5. That's a stunning self-inflicted environmental wound that cost them a massive non-renewable resource. What was the immediate global consequence?
Since they had ruined their domestic water supply by trying to grow crops in the desert, they were forced into becoming major global buyers of agricultural land in foreign countries.
So buying up farmland in the U.S., Argentina?
Sudan, Ethiopia,
Yeah.
all to secure their national food supply. It perfectly illustrates the paradox. The world's most prominent energy superpower is facing a critical, looming water and food scarcity crisis that they engineered themselves.
Moving from economic power to military power, the KSA is a massive global defense player, and their expenditure reflects both their wealth and their insecurity.
The figures are striking. Saudi Arabia consistently ranks among the world's highest military spenders. The 2024 estimate places them 7th globally, spending approximately $80.3 billion.
And that investment has made them the world's second-largest arms importer.
Yes, between 2019 and 2023, they are building a high-tech arsenal designed to project power regionally.
This high-tech arsenal is supported by key strategic alliances, most notably with the United States.
The U.S. remains their long-standing strategic ally and primary arms provider, accounting for 12% of all U.S. arms exports in 2024. But their security relationships are diverse, involving major contracts with the UK and France as well.
And there's this enduring speculation about a relationship with Pakistan.
A persistent speculation noted in our sources, yes. Specifically that Saudi Arabia may have secretly funded Pakistan's atomic bomb program with the intention of securing a potential future nuclear capability for themselves.
That speculation ties directly into their primary regional rivalry, Iran.
This proxy conflict has defined Saudi foreign policy since the 1979 Islamic Revolution. The KSA views Iran's revolutionary Shiite ideology and its proxies across the region, in Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, and Yemen, as the single greatest threat to the survival of the House of Saud.
And their fears over Iranian influence just intensified after the 2003 U.S. invasion of Iraq.
That destabilized the region, and then the chaos of the Arab Spring poured fuel on the fire.
This rivalry has led to direct military engagement, most visibly in Yemen.
Saudi Arabia launched a major intervention in the Yemeni civil war in 2015, mobilizing 150,000 troops and 100 jets. This was a direct response to the perceived takeover of Yemen by Iranian-backed Houthi forces,
So a sustained bombing campaign and a naval blockade.
all aimed at preventing weapons shipments and restoring the internationally recognized government.
Given that deep security anxiety, the ultimate projection of power nuclear capability has been explicitly mentioned by Riyadh.
They've been very clear about their nuclear ambitions since 2018. The KSA has repeatedly expressed a public willingness to acquire or develop nuclear weapons if its regional rival, Iran, develops one.
So it's about deterrence.
It's tied to national security, but fundamentally it is about securing ultimate deterrence against Iranian regional ambition and ensuring the long-term survival of the absolute monarchy.
Before we move on, we have to address the serious, persistent allegations regarding the KSA's historical role in funding and exporting religious extremism.
This is a complex and dark part of the file. Saudi Arabia has been repeatedly accused by various high-level international figures of being a critical financial support base for Sunni terrorist groups.
I mean, former U.S. Secretary of State Hillary Clinton stated that donors in Saudi Arabia constituted the most significant source of funding to Sunni terrorist groups worldwide, including al-Qaeda.
That is a staggering accusation against a key U.S. strategic ally. The Saudi government, for its part, vehemently denies exporting terrorism or extremism.
But there have been policy shifts.
Yes. In response to intense international pressure and domestic modernization efforts, there have been some noticeable policy shifts since 2016. Our sources highlight that they curbed the operational powers of the religious police, the Mutaween, and crucially, they stopped the direct funding of mosques and religious centers in foreign countries,
Which represents a calculated effort to shift their international image.
away from the radical elements of Wahhabism that were previously supported or, at the very least, tolerated. Let's turn now to the fabric of Saudi society. where the changes driven by Vision 2030 are often the most contentious and visible. It's creating intense tensions between rigid tradition and rapid liberalization.
And the pace of change is amplified by the unique demographic profile. The total population is about 32.2 million, and critically, Saudi Arabia is a very young nation. Over half the population is under the age of 25.
And that young population is connected globally, which makes the pressure for reform and entertainment even more urgent.
They coexist uneasily with a massive foreign labor force.
Close to 42% of the inhabitants, over 10 million people, are immigrants, making it one of the world's largest immigrant populations. These individuals are essential to running the private sector, yet they often live under the kafala system.
The kafala system is widely criticized by human rights organizations globally. Can you just break down its functional mechanism for us?
Sure, the system requires foreign workers to have a designated employer, or sponsor, who is responsible for their visa, residency, and work permit. This means the worker cannot leave their job, change employment, or often even leave the country without the sponsor's explicit permission.
And that's where the abuse comes in.
Human rights groups link this system to severe abuses, often describing it as a form of modern slavery, particularly impacting vulnerable domestic workers who have no recourse against abusive employers.
Meanwhile, the government's goal of Saudization, replacing foreign workers with Saudis, is constantly complicated by that growing young population and the economic necessity of cheap foreign labor.
Precisely. The state is trying to solve a labor paradox, reducing reliance on foreigners while maintaining economic competitiveness and absorbing a huge wave of young, educated citizens into the workforce.
When we look at religious demographics, the dominance of Wahhabi Sunni Islam is overwhelming, and religious pluralism is, well, it's non-existent.
Virtually all citizens are Muslim. Sunni Islam, the Wahhabism Salafism movement, is the official and dominant form, making up 85 to 90%. The remaining 10 to 15% are Shia Muslims, mainly concentrated in the oil-rich eastern province.
The same area that caused concerns during the 1979 Iranian Revolution?
Exactly. And the state actively prohibits non-Muslim religious expression in public spaces.
And the state's definition of a religious freedom, even for its own citizens, is incredibly rigid.
It is absolute. Religious conversion from Islam, apostasy, is strictly forbidden and is punishable by death. Furthermore, our sources reveal the state's official stance toward atheists and agnostics. They are officially classified as terrorists,
Equating a lack of religious belief with a capital threat to the state.
It highlights the profound ideological rigidity inherent in the system.
Let's turn to culture and social life, specifically the highly visible reforms related to women's rights and entertainment, starting with dress codes.
Dress strictly follows the principles of hijab, or modesty. Men typically wear the long, ankle-length thobe with the traditional headdress. Women are required in public to wear a black abaya or other black clothing that covers everything under the neck, with the exception of their hands and feet.
And this strict requirement has long been a key marker of Saudi public life.
A very visible marker. But the most symbolic element of the recent liberalization push has been the reintroduction of public entertainment, reversing that cultural crackdown of the 1980s.
A direct reversal of the 1979 consequences.
Absolutely. Cinemas and theaters were closed for decades. However, since 2017, the General Entertainment Authority has been actively promoting public entertainment, hosting massive international music concerts, sporting events, comedy shows.
The first public cinema in 35 years reopened in 2018.
And the plans are ambitious. Over 2,000 screens are slated to be running across the country by 2030. This is an attempt to address the demands of that young, globally connected population.
This cultural shift is running parallel to the highly publicized, though still incomplete, reforms concerning women's legal and social status since 2017.
We have seen a series of gradual, limited reforms. The most famous was the lifting of the ban on women driving in 2018.
Right.
More fundamentally, the male guardianship system, which required women to seek permission for many basic life functions, was partially amended in 2019.
And this amendment exempted women over the age of 21 from needing guardian permission to travel abroad, register for marriage or divorce, or apply for official documents.
It's a significant shift, and the progression continued. In 2022, women were granted the right to initiate divorce without their guardian's approval. Economically, the female labor force participation rate has doubled, and women have been appointed to several senior roles,
including the first female deputy minister and the first female head of the Saudi Stock Exchange. These visible changes are marketed internationally as proof of modernization.
They are.
However, our sources provide an essential reality check that highlights the gap between public perception and legal reality. Persistent discrimination remains deeply entrenched.
The judicial system is where this gap is most evident. Women still face clear discrimination in courts. For example, in family and inheritance law, the testimony of one man is deemed equal to that of two women.
And men retain the unilateral right to divorce.
They do, simply by saying the word talaq. It's a right not afforded to women without judicial intervention.
And beyond the courts, the sources painted a disturbing picture regarding the institutions meant to protect vulnerable women.
This is a necessary moment to slow down and consider the implications. While the guardianship system was partially amended, reports from 2025 highlighted the reality of Dar el-Araya, which are officially designated care homes.
But they function more like
They often function as effective jails for women institutionalized by their own families for vague reasons like disobedience or absence from home. Treatment in these facilities was reported as severe, involving harsh treatment, solitary confinement, and even punitive flogging.
So it showcases the vast, often unseen gap between international-facing social reforms and the internal personal reality for many women.
The weight of tradition and family control is still immense.
Finally, let's look at the final paradox, the approach to cultural heritage. The kingdom is destroying its immediate religious past while promoting its deep secular past.
This contradiction stems directly from the Wahhabi ideology, which is fiercely hostile to the reverence of historical or religious sites out of fear of promoting idolatry or shirk. This has led to truly immense destruction, especially in Mecca and Medina,
In the name of religious purity,
and of course, expansion projects.
what is the extent of this destruction?
It is breathtakingly total. One critical fact highlighted by our sources is the estimate that 95% of Mecca's historic buildings, some dating back over 1,000 years, have been demolished
95%.
for religious reasons or to make way for massive hotels and infrastructure projects. This includes sites directly linked to the Prophet Muhammad, his family, and companions. The physical history of early Islam is largely being erased.
Yet simultaneously, Vision 2030 is pouring vast resources into promoting and preserving the country's pre-Islamic heritage.
This is the dual approach in action. The state is actively preserving and promoting non-Islamic historical sites. 8 are currently designated as UNESCO World Heritage Sites, like Al-Hijr and Historic Jeddah,
And they're funding archaeology?
aggressively.
Yeah.
The kingdom has allocated 900 million euros just to heritage preservation under Vision 2030, leading to exciting finds, such as the recently discovered 4,000-year-old Bronze Age city of Al-Nata. They are essentially leveraging a deep, distant past to broaden the national identity beyond solely the restrictive Wahhabi religious interpretation.
We have completed a comprehensive deep dive into the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, a nation that is fundamentally defined by these interwoven tensions and contradictions at every single level.
That is the necessary conclusion. Saudi Arabia is a nation rooted in that 18th century alliance of religious ideology and dynastic rule, an alliance that was massively empowered and fundamentally transformed by the discovery of 20th century oil wealth.
The profound tension we see today flows directly from that heritage. It's defined by the absolute political structures of the House of Saud colliding with highly publicized social and economic liberalization efforts under Vision 2030.
It's a massive, delicate balancing act.
And it's designed entirely to ensure the perpetuation of absolute dynastic rule in a modernized, economically sustainable context.
And when we synthesize the sources on its military and geopolitical positioning, that need for absolute security becomes crystal clear. We see staggering high spending on modern military hardware and repeated explicit expressions of a willingness to acquire nuclear weapons if its primary regional rival, Iran, develops them.
So, here is our final provocative thought for you to consider as you wrap up this deep dive. Considering the KSA's position as a major G20 economy, the world's second-largest arms importer, and the only nation on Earth literally named after its ruling family, what does this aggressive pursuit of ultimate military deterrence, this desire for nuclear capability, tell you about the House of Saud's underlying perception of regional stability and its willingness to go to any length necessary to secure its unique, absolute power structure for the long-term future?
Think about what it means for a family to feel they need the ultimate protection over their personal kingdom of Arabia.